Good morning, I'm Jackie, and today I'm joined by Mandy Morrell, and we're going to be chatting about astrology. Now, I came to meet Mandy as a fellow healer and member of the Healing Foundation, but as the years have passed, I keep discovering many talents that this lady has. Mandy studied at Oxford. She has several qualifications in astrology and is a presenter for the Company of Astrologers. She also plays in an orchestra. Welcome, Mandy.
Thank you, Jackie.
Hiya. So tell me, what instrument is it that you play?
I play the violin and the viola, mainly the violin now, and I lead a string quartet as well. The other members all being fellow members of the orchestra. So it's like a little pod out of the orchestra.
And do you feel that's like your real creative outlet? Is that's a passion of yours?
Absolutely, and especially leading the quartet, I seem to have a natural flair for being the first violinist in a quartet.
Oh, that's brilliant. Oh, okay. So we're going to talk today about astrology. So let's start real basics. What is astrology, and what does the word actually mean?
Well, it literally means the study of the stars, but it's not the same as astronomy, which is the study of the laws of planetary motion or the scientific facts. And many people may remember Fritjof Capra, the author who brought out this wonderful book in 1996 called The Web of Life. And that was the start of a movement towards seeing life as an interconnected whole. And that's what the ancients knew. And the famous Hermetic maxim from the ancient world, as above, so below, really applies to the study of astrology, because we're not seeing causative factors in the planetary movements. It's all correlations between what's happening in the sky and what's happening here on Earth, to individuals, to families, to states, to the whole world. So it is a correlation. And so that's what astrology is, basically.
Oh, that's really interesting. You sort of think of it as just those little articles in the newspaper, but there's obviously there's so much to it. So how would you, because people often read those little bits in the newspaper and they say, well, how can that describe everybody who's like a Leo or a Capricorn? How do you respond to that? Tell us a bit more about it.
Very easy to respond to that. I mean, basically the newspaper articles, which I never read, I have to confess, concentrate on the sun sign. And of course, the sun is so important. It's our vision for life, the myth we live by, very important. But it is not the only factor in the chart. There are so many other factors, the moon and all the other planets and North Node and South Node, all sorts of other factors to make up a full horoscope. Not leaving out, of course, the word horoscope itself, which means watcher of the hour. So the moment you're born, the ascendant is so important as well. So basically, you're going to have a very limited picture if you just take the sun. But I think the only value of the newspaper articles is to give a sort of ambience to a sign. If, for example, you have a powerful aspect between outer planets that happen to contact those signs are in those signs at the time, there will be a flavor of that affecting everyone with that sun sign, but it's very weak. And of course, because there are 30 degrees in a sun sign, not everyone's going to have it exact, aren't they? So it's actually a very watered down version of astrology.
And am I right in thinking that when you have a proper sort of astrology chart done, they're looking at all of the planets and where they were when you were born? Am I right?
Yes, they're looking at your natal chart, which is the actual moment that you're born. If you know your time, obviously some people don't, and that is sometimes problematical. There are ways of having a very educated guess, as it were, but it's better if you know your time. But there are so many factors, and what a lot of people don't realize, which we'll come on to later, is that the chart actually evolves. We have things called progressions, which show how there's an internal evolution of the chart throughout the life. So it's not a static thing.
Okay, so can you can you actually predict things like marriage and having babies and world events, that sort of thing?
Absolutely, very easily. It's not about predicting as such, it's being able to see when that internal evolution has taken place. You know, when someone is ready for having a baby, for example, but they might choose not to have one, and they might actually use that energy to be more creative in their own life, because the sign and the house that you're looking at for babies would be Leo and the 5th house of the chart. Not to get too technical here, but that's what you'd be looking at, and the ruler of that house. And if that house is indicated, if it comes up by progression or even by a very powerful transit as well, that can bring it. I always prefer to go with progressions for something as big as having a baby or getting married. This is babies I'm talking about, not marriage at the moment. You would actually see that that ruler had been progressed to make a proper aspect with something else in the chart, or, you know, it would be live basically. And then you could say, yes, this is a very good time to have a baby. And in my own chart, it was quite extraordinary. I had both my children very young when my son had progressed from Gemini to Cancer, which is the sign of motherhood. And the sun had just gone into that sign, and I had my children. So, you know, there are other ways as well as the 5th house, but yes, you can see that by progression.
Okay, so tell us a little bit more about the moon sign, because I find that quite interesting, and I think that's quite an important one, isn't it, to know what our moon sign is?
It's extremely important, because the moon, as opposed to the sun, which is our vision for our life, and if you like, our eternal self, the moon is how we are actually comfortable in our bodies and in everyday life, and where we rest, if you like. It's our default setting and our habits. So it's incredibly important. And I think when people talk about sun sign compatibility with partners, that's all very well. And there's another way of looking at partner compatibility as well, which is involving the ascendant, descendant axis. But the moon compatibility, I think, is so important if you're going to live with someone, because your daily habits and your daily ways of reacting to things are something you cannot really change. You can modify them. So if you're very heavily Cancerian, you can try not to sulk, but you can still lead that. I'm not. It's all right. I'm just using it as an example. You can try not to, but you would still have that tendency to take things very deeply. And so you wouldn't want to be with someone who just brushed it all off every time and made you feel unimportant. So, you know, it is extremely important. But all the planets are. But the moon is a light along with the sun. They are both together known as the lights. And it is incredibly important.
Okay, so my moon is in Capricorn. What can you tell me?
Interesting, very interesting. Well, I've mentioned Cancer as being the sign ruled by the moon. So Capricorn, being the opposite sign, is not the most comfortable place to have the moon from that point of view, but it means that you are incredibly hardworking, which I can vouch for. Incredibly hardworking, incredibly organized, which I also admire very much.
Oh, well, I'm not sure about that one.
Well, that's certainly part of it. Organized, yes. Saturn likes things defined, and it likes to have boundaries around things, and it is actually quite a hard taskmaster if you let it be. But if you regard it as giving you necessary structure, it's a very good thing indeed. But I think with moon in Capricorn, there might have been a tendency when you were young to feel that you had to work hard to be really accepted. There is that sense that you have to work for your justification for being alive. You know?
Well, you don't work much harder than when you're in a family business, do you? So
exactly. Well, that's the other thing, working to justify yourself, but also working from home. Indeed, and in the family. That's really interesting. That does actually figure very well. My own Saturn is in Capricorn, so I love the sign Capricorn. So my grandfather was was a very, very powerful one, born on Christmas Day, and so was his father and grandfather. So it's come down the family, the Capricorn.
Oh, wow.
Yes, that's the other thing. You do see these family tendencies. And in fact, the great astronomer Kepler used to write letters to his mathematics professor all the time, explaining the links he had with his children and saying that was the surest proof that astrology works, because you see all these links between family members.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. So what's your sun sign?
I'm a Gemini.
You're a Gemini, which is my opposite sign, because I'm Sagittarius.
That's right. So we work very well together. It's good partnership.
Okay. So how have you found, obviously, I mean, you've been doing this since what, 97?
Yes, that's when I
first that time.
Yes.
You've been working with astrology and stuff. So how have you found that it's helped you? How have you been able to, use it? Can you use it to your advantage? Has it worked that way?
My goodness, absolutely. And I think the main joy of astrology is looking back. I don't tend to want to predict forward. Looking back, you see the landmark events in your life in a different light. And if something has been really traumatic, and I've had plenty of events like that, you look back and you see how it was absolutely meant to be, and it was part of your life journey, and it helps with acceptance, understanding, and empowerment, really. You think, well, this is my life, and those things that happened that were so difficult, they've made me who I am, and you just understand all the energies involved better. And the other thing which I think has helped enormously is to understand my connections with others, which is what we call synastry, stars together, literally, when you compare the planetary alignments in different charts and you see how you affect one another. That has been most helpful in every relationship.
Okay, so is that like the first thing you do when you meet someone, you ask them what their sign is?
No, I do not do that at all. But obviously, if they start to ask me about astrology, and then I have a look and I think, oh yes, I understand where we come together. And I think the only contact that I find impossible is if somebody's Saturn is on my Mercury, because Mercury is my sun ruler of Gemini. And if someone has Saturn on that degree, there's nothing I can say to them that they will accept. They block everything I'm trying to say to them.
It's actually really, really complex, isn't it? This stuff.
Is.
It is. So if somebody came to you and said, I want to know about my natal chart as such, how long does that actually take you to sit and work this sort of thing out?
Well, I've got a computer generated system now, no problem. So I was trained how to do it by hand with logarithms and all the rest, but I don't need to do that now. So it's instant. And after doing it for so many years, I don't even need to prepare. I just have the chart with me. If I see someone, and I like to have the chart printed out between us, because I don't want people to think that I'm just spouting at them. I'm trying to just be almost like a mediator for their own chart. So I have the chart in between, and then I just speak as things come out. And the phrase that comes out again and again with people who come to see me is, oh, it's really funny you should say that.
It is, and I think I found when I delved a bit deeper than like you say the sun sign, you read through these different things, you go, oh yeah, that makes sense. So it's really quite enlightening, isn't it?
It is. And just to help people accept themselves as well, I think that is a huge thing. So many people, especially today with all the sort of, Instagram and social media and things, people try to be the perfect version of, I don't know, some ideal that's out there. And
there's a lot of pressure, isn't there?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So one of the, obviously the planet that probably affects us, the one that we're most aware of, is the moon, isn't it? Because we can see it. Can you explain very briefly the moon cycle for us and how that can impact our sort of day-to-day life?
Oh, indeed. I mean, I think most people will feel the effects of both the new and the full moon. I mean, the new moon is a very difficult time. It's almost like the light's gone out. You're in the dark and you can feel really off and not know what on earth's gone wrong. And that's just quite natural. And obviously, if you think back to ancient times when they didn't have artificial light or anything, no moon was really quite difficult for them, and they might panic and think, oh, you know, I can't see my way. The full moon, on the other hand, is a time when whatever started at the seed moment of the new moon comes to fruition. So it is actually a much more rich time. If you think of the new moon as a time of poverty, it's a richness at the full moon, but it has its attendant dangers. It's actually very hard to sleep with the full moon. And also it's a very bad time to have an operation because there's far more bleeding at the time of the full moon. That has been absolutely proved. And it was also noted by Lawrence van der Post, who was a prisoner of the Japanese after the Second World War, that the cruelty that he experienced was worse at full moon. So it does have an effect, there's no doubt about it. And in medical astrology, you know, they would actually time the giving of herbs to the phases of the moon as well. So it is very powerful. And of course, we know that it's been very much linked to agriculture, times for sowing, times for etc. The other thing that I can add from the medical tradition, this is a top tip for anyone having an operation, it's best not to have an operation on a part of the body the sign ruling which the moon is in at that time. So if you're going to have an operation on your throat, don't have it when the moon is in Taurus, which rules the throat area. So that sort of thing, that's the top tip.
I love that phrase you just used about the new moon. I can't see my way.
Yeah,
that's just like, that's perfect, isn't it? Because often people get, you know, I get inquiries from probably more clients and even like family members and friends, and they're just like, you know, I really don't know what's going on. I don't know what to do, you know, because they're in that almost dark phase, aren't they? And I have to go, oh, hold on a minute, don't forget where the moon is.
That's right, jolly good.
It's really interesting. Oh, Mandy, could talk to you for ages, but we probably need to wrap up. If anybody wants to, you know, talk further or maybe even learn about their natal chart, where can they find you?
Best way is just email address.
Okay.
And
so we'll put your email address below.
That's fine.
And anything you want to add, anything really important that you feel that we need to know?
Well, just to finish off with, I mean, you did ask earlier about world events, and I haven't actually mentioned that very much. That's called mundane astrology, after mundus in Latin, which means the world. And nobody would be surprised to hear that there are very powerful Uranus contacts to Putin's, Zelensky's and Ukraine's chart at the moment.
Okay.
So, you know, the outer planets in particular, especially when they're in contact with each other, in aspect to each other, really do have a very powerful effect on the world, but particularly if they aspect the charts of leaders or countries. Countries have their charts as well, which go back to significant moments. Like for us in Britain, we have 1066, the coronation of William the Conqueror, and 1801, the Union. So those world events are important. And, you know, just to give you a really powerful example, and it is relevant because it's Russia, of a planetary aspect that has been so significant in world history, and that is the Saturn-Neptune conjunctions of the last century. So the first one, 1917, Russian Revolution. Second one, 1953, Stalin's death. Third one, 1989, fall of the Berlin Wall. So it just shows you how they really do correlate with world events. And even the discoveries of the outer planets correlated with world events. Uranus in 1781, that correlated with all the revolutions of the time, the French Revolution only 8 years later, sorry. So, you know, it definitely does all tie in. And with the pandemic, that was Pluto at 24 Capricorn, and it was leading us into a new era with Saturn and Jupiter conjunct in Aquarius, which we could see at the Christmas time at the end of 20. And that new era, I think, is starting with a lot of chaos, but hopefully will settle down.
So have we got some good stuff on the horizon? Is there some good stuff coming?
Well, I think there's going to be quite a lot of turbulence, because obviously so many old habits have to change, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's always the case, even on a smaller scale, if you change a system, there's chaos for a while. So I think that there is a significant rise in the number of people who really do have ideals of a better way of doing things. And I think that feeds into what happens.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you. Thank
Very
you for your
welcome.
time, Mandy. And
Very welcome. It's a pleasure.
yeah, as I said, I shall put Mandy's details below. So just get in touch. And if you want to look further, go for it. It's so interesting. Thank you. And I'll see you all later.
Thank you.